Welcome to Indispensable, Connection Ministries' video training series for churches and volunteers who are building Christian community with adults with intellectual disabilities. This episode is titled Safety and Registration and is the second episode in Administration and Safety.
My name is Jackie Schaefer, and welcome to Indispensable, a video training series for friendship groups with adults with intellectual disabilities. In this episode, we will look at the importance of developing formal safety and risk management procedures. Training the church staff and volunteer teams on these procedures is a necessary step in creating a safe environment for adults with intellectual disabilities, volunteers, and congregations. The procedures we will cover are for friendship groups in the Connection Ministries network. However, they can also be used for other disability ministries. The weekly friendship group is a community where our friends with intellectual disabilities, families, direct support staff, and church members can grow in Christ and minister together. Don Bowden will now review the Connection Ministries network safety procedures.
Common sense procedures can be put in place to provide a safe environment for friends with intellectual disabilities while protecting our volunteers and congregations. These procedures will minimize risk, abuse, and injury, and establish methods for maintaining records, evacuation, and reporting abuse. For the purposes of this video, we'll use the acronym IDD when we are talking about people with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Connection Ministries has provided sample friendship safety guidelines that churches can use as a template, and it's available on our website. These procedures are a collection gathered from the Christian Law Association and various congregations. Connection Ministries guidelines begins with our biblical foundation that every part of the body is indispensable, including the parts who seem to be weaker, taken from 1 Corinthians 12, verses 21 through 25. With this understanding, we are committed to establishing Christian communities where our friends with IDD can find a safe place where they're able to grow in Christ. Our first topic is registration. It is important that everyone who participates in a friendship group is properly registered by completing an application. This includes friends with IDD, participating family members, support staff, volunteers, and any paid church staff who are involved in the ministry. It is vital for the leadership of the ministry to have access to the necessary information to provide a safe environment. The registration data needs to be collected, maintained, and accessible while protecting the privacy of every participant. The Connection Ministries Network offers both a downloadable as well as an online application that churches may use as an example, which is available on our website. A push is made to update applications at the beginning of each program season. This is done in the spring and before the summer friendship gathering season, and again in the fall as the friendship groups begin to meet. We also collect applications as new participants join the ministry. Connection Ministries registration procedure collects contact and biographical information, including the date of birth, along with any emergency contacts, a description of disabilities, necessary assistance, and assisted devices. Also, special dietary requirements, any history of seizures, ability to communicate, as well as adaptive methods, positive supports for behavior, liability and photo releases that names both the church and Connection Ministries. We also include an authorization for a criminal background screen and review of the sexual offender registry. This data is kept in a secure database and never shared with outside individuals or organizations or anyone who does not have a need for the information. Copies of applications for each friendship group are shared with the group's leaders. We also provide the group with rosters. Copies of the application should be available to the leaders every time the group meets for emergency purposes. Churches also need to adopt policies with procedures that friendship groups can follow to reduce the risk to your friends with IDD, volunteers, and the congregation. Volunteers and church staff who participate in church-sponsored activities with people with disabilities should be trained on these procedures. The Connection Ministries Network screens all volunteers and church staff involved in the ministry every 2 years. We review the Indiana Sexual Offenders Registry also for our friendship group participants with IDD. Criminal background screens that come back with conviction for past abuse or violent crimes are privately reviewed with the individual. Credit reporting agencies maintain this data and errors are possible. This process gives the individual a chance to correct their data with the credit reporting agency. Individuals found to have a valid conviction for past abuse or violent crimes are not permitted to participate in the ministry. At no time should a volunteer, a church member, or church worker who participates in church-sponsored activities with people with IDD be alone with a person with IDD. There always needs to be a second adult within view. This is called the rule of 3. A second adult volunteer should be present when a person with IDD uses the restroom or needs to move to another space, whether they need to meet at the church or elsewhere. When it is possible to follow the rule of 3, for example, would be to use the restroom and no one else is available. The door should be kept open, or somebody waits outside, but always respects the dignity of the person with IDD. It may be necessary to provide transportation and a third person is not available. It is best to have written permission of the parent, guardian, or service provider to transport the individual. When a church-sponsored group for people with IDD has both male and female participants, both male and female adult volunteers should be present. It may be necessary to provide personal care that may include assistance with bathroom or changing of clothes. It is important to protect the person with IDD and ensure their dignity. If a family member or a compensated caregiver is available, it's always best to employ their services. People with IDD who are supported in residential settings by a service provider come with compensated caregivers. It is part of their job to assist with their personal care. These caregivers should be the first people to provide personal care for the people whom they are responsible. A minimum of 2 trained volunteer companions or compensated workers should be present for every church activity with people with IDD, regardless of how few people with IDD are in attendance. Always strive to use the rule of 3. If a person with IDD is behaving inappropriately, it is important to tell the person specifically what he or she is doing that is not acceptable. Also, let them know what behavior is expected. Here's an example. We do not use that kind of language, but we speak kindly to each other. If this measure is not effective, the person with IDD can be guided to another area or activity. If inappropriate behavior continues, the person should be moved away from others. If the person's disruptive behavior continues after these steps have been taken, the family or a caregiver would be called to stay with them or take them home. Corporal discipline or verbal abuse, such as ridicule, should not be used at any time. If isolating the person or removal from the room becomes necessary, the situation will be discussed with the parent, guardian, or caregiver as soon as possible. It is important that ministry spaces used should remain open and visible. It should be known to everyone that the ministry spaces may be visited without prior notice by church staff, parents, caregivers, volunteers, or church members. Interior doors will not be locked during activities. Ministry spaces should have windows or doors open where other people can see into the space. There may be a need to provide transportation for a person with IDD. The leader of the friendship group should know each person designated to provide transportation to or from church. The driver will have an up-to-date ministry application and background screen. They should be at least 21 years of age. have a valid state driver's license qualified for the vehicle that they will be operating, have no record of convictions for the past 5 years for drunk driving, driving under the influence, driving with a suspended or revoked license, or reckless endangerment. They need to have proof of insurance. They should not be alone in a vehicle with a person with IDD unless they are related. It may be necessary to provide transportation and a third person is not available. It is best to have written permission of both the parent, the guardian, the service provider to transport this individual. We love to give gifts, but sadly, some gifts are used to buy another person's silence. Gifts given is best done on a group basis or for special occasions. Gifts should not be elaborate, but should be modest and appropriate to the occasion. Personal gifts should not be given to an individual with IDD without the prior knowledge of the parents, guardian, or caregiver, because gift giving can be a form of buying loyalty or silence. There may be an opportunity for overnight stays at a volunteer's home or a mission trip. These activities must be carefully planned. Rule of 3 should always be practiced. Volunteers or church workers who participate in church-sponsored activities with people with IDD who have a current application and background screen should be the chaperones for these outings. Volunteers or church workers should have written permission from the family, guardian, or service provider before taking the person with IDD on an overnight outing. Churches should have emergency evacuation procedures for all the ministry spaces used by the Friendship Group. Friendship Group leaders and companions need to be familiar with the evacuation procedures. These friendship groups should review and practice these procedures at least once a year. The procedures we've covered in this video are guidelines that are a starting place for your congregation as they adopt policies for the church's friendship group. It is important that congregations adopt safety policies and train their disability ministry teams on the procedures. Thank you for watching this episode of Administration and Safety. Next to this video on our website, you'll find a link for the safety procedure sample that you can download and print. Join us for the next Administration and Safety episode as we review the procedure for protecting victims and reporting alleged abuse. If you have any questions or need information, you can email us at connect@connection-ministries.org or call our office 317-646-5067. Your prayers and financial gifts help Connection Ministries provide valuable resources for churches and families ministering with adults with intellectual disabilities. You can give online at www.connection-ministries.org.